hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we.
From this point forward, conditions will continue to deteriorate.
Don't let COVID-19 take your eye off the tropics. This year's threat is more complex and dangerous than ever before.
Remain vigilant, pay close attention to the Weather Channel.
No one can cover this historic hurricane season better than the Weather Channel. Get the information you need to stay safe every day. Storm safety in a pandemic, all season long, right here on the Weather Channel.
Good afternoon from Clear Creek in Texas. This is the Houston suburb of Pearland, and this is what happens when you get a foot of rain. No, it's not as bad as Harvey. Right now we're sitting at about 16 feet. That's a moderate flood stage. Forecast to go about another 3 feet higher. But if you can imagine, in Harvey, the water was about 8.5 feet higher than it is now. We do have some homes here on the Sleepy Hollow Street that have water coming right up to the front door. You can see the house right behind me. In fact, we're using the mailbox here out on the driveway, at the end of the driveway. I'm holding onto this so the boat stays in position. The water here is about 3 feet deep. It's not tremendously deep, but it does the damage enough. So we've got about looks like about 4 or 5 homes here. And then on this side, we have just one home, really. This home right here in the corner has some water in the garage, but you look around the backyard with a fence, and you don't see much in the backyard. So I think that home is in pretty good shape. It's all about these homes right here. And again, Clear Creek does eventually, all the water in Houston ends up in the ship channel and down to Galveston Bay and down into Galveston and off into the Gulf of Mexico. So once again, not moving very fast. There's not a swift current here, but it's going that way. And it's a long creek here in this part of Houston in Pearland. But again, you get a sense of how deep the water is, about halfway up to the tops of the tires. The forecast is for about 19 feet. That's about 3 feet higher. But when we were getting on the boat, we noticed the water had come down on the street. We could see the debris line, and I estimated it's dropped about 6 inches. That's a good sign, but we still have more rain in the forecast. We're under a flash flood warning here for at least the next couple of hours. They reissued it. But on the radar, there's not anything substantial. We've had a couple of showers, and they're all rotating in around Tropical Depression Beta. And so any additional rain is going to hold back the release of the water downstream. So we've had issues today. We showed you coverage on 610 and over on the areas around the south part of Houston and the southwest side of Houston. So the water is going down right now, as I mentioned. We'll see how that flood forecast, that prediction, how it works out. Hopefully it does not come back up to 19 feet. I checked. If it goes up to 19 feet, that would be the 6th highest on record. Number one by far, Harvey, and that was at 24.25 feet 3 years ago. We talked to some folks from Harvey, and they said it was a lot higher. In fact, on the other side, there's a berm. There were homes there, but they took those out after Alicia. That was about 20 years ago, Tropical Storm Alicia, and they never rebuilt for a good reason. A lot of folks are moving to higher ground. They're deciding, do we build or not rebuild as things change with the climate. So again, water is up. It's staying up. We hope it goes down faster than sooner. But again, Jackie, looking at the water has dropped off about 6 inches, although we keep an eye on the forecast here on Clear Creek. Again, Pearland on the south and southeast side of Houston.
Yeah, Pearland's got as much as 10 inches or so of rain here for sure, Mike. And we're keeping an eye on the radar trends that we've been seeing. I know Clear Creek certainly out of its banks. Can you see the creek? How far away are you from the water source?
Well, the creek, let me ask our boat tenders, where's the creek actually? Back there? Yeah, let's see if Austin, we can swing the boat around a little bit, Jackie. We can't even use the motor here because the water's not deep enough. It's, like I said, 2 or 3 feet. But you can see through the trees, Austin, to your left of the sign, to the right of the sign, if you go in tighter, you can see the water flowing from left to right on screen. So that's where the creek normally is. So it's way over its banks. In fact, we're actually on the road. This is Sleepy Hollow, where we're sitting in the boat, and this is their mailbox. So this is normally how people would get into their homes, but they can't now. Now, from the back, I can tell you, this water doesn't go into the backyards very deep. So I think the issues are going to be if what gets in the front yard. Notice there, it's not up to the stoop, but we don't know what's going on, in the foundation area.
In the garage either.
Another tough day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're just hoping that as the center of the circulation comes over us tonight and early tomorrow morning, we don't get much additional rainfall, but it is in the forecast, as you mentioned. The flash flood watch continues into tomorrow, and again, we have that flash flood warning, but nothing imminent as far as what we had last night and early this morning. I mean, it just, some areas had over a foot of rain.
Yeah, let's take a look at a couple of those things real quick here, Mike. You know, Beta still just crawling along here into Texas, and it's going to take until late tomorrow before it finally begins to exit the state of Texas. Here's a look at the radar, and the trending is showing some of the heavier bands have been on the east side of town now and getting a little bit closer towards the Beaumont area. But embedded within this area, within that flash flood warning, you can see a couple of those returns are a little bit brighter, and that is indicative of getting as much as nearly a half of an inch just in the last hour. And so that is not good news, but it is in a very isolated area. Here's Pearland. This is the area where Mike is. So you can see Pearland has had now almost 13 inches of rainfall in the last 48 hours. Stay with us for continuing coverage.
When it's a special.
Thank you for staying with us as the Weather Channel tracks breaking weather news here in Houston, Texas, the ongoing flood threat. As you can see behind me here on Commerce Street, yes, folks, it is flooded. In fact, the Buffalo Bayou is actually pushing water back through the drainage systems, and that's what these small geysers and fountains are coming out of the water. It's pretty remarkable to see that all of this is a function and a result of rainwater coming down in the wake of Tropical Storm Beta. This is rain has prompted all of this, and we know more rain is to come. It's a very concerning situation because the bayous here, in fact, Mark Whaley behind the lens. Mark, show people right through there. You can see Buffalo Bayou is well over its banks, and you can see how quickly it's flowing over enough that it's backing up the entire drainage system here in the city of Houston in many places. So this is not the time to go out. This is not the time to go explore. This is not the time to say, hey, the rain stopped. Let's go see the flooding, because the rains keep coming in waves, and when it comes down hard, and it lasts for a while, and those waters come right back up again. It's kind of remarkable how quickly we see the water rise and how quickly we see it fall. Right now it's falling, but we do know that there are more bands of rain coming, and what that could do is continue to flood streets like this, and that's a big concern for a lot of people. Now, coming up in the next maybe 20 minutes here on the Weather Channel, it's interesting because right at the end of the street, you see that white truck over there with the flashing lights? That is a crew from Harris County, and what they're doing is actually tracking the flow of the Buffalo Bayou. They're tracking to see how fast the water is moving, how far it has risen, and what they do is use all of this data. It's pretty remarkable over the years of tracking these floods to try to predict what's going to happen in the future. We're going to show you the devices they're using to do that in the water coming up here on the Weather Channel. But it's great scientific work they're doing just at the end of this bridge to help Houston moving forward. Carl, back into you.
All right, Justin, thank you so much. And since 1949, the forward speed of tropical cyclones has declined by 16% when making landfall in the Atlantic Basin. And so what you're looking at here is a reflection of that trend. This storm just barely moving in the last day. And so we saw this big area, this big arm of moisture driving up and across Houston, just really not moving. And that's why we got so much rainfall out of this thing. And we're expecting that there's going to be even more. You see this relatively narrow swath of very heavy rain. A lot of the Houston metro area didn't get nearly as much, but it was an awful lot of rain on the south side of town near the South Loop, the Gulf Freeway, 288 as well, some parts of the southwest side of Houston and down 59. Right now, the rain has thinned out a good bit, but there are ongoing flash flood warnings. A new one here has been issued for Harris County. This is an ongoing warning for Brazoria, Fort Bend, Harris until 4:45. Here is the new one for Harris County going until 4:30. And you see the rain is not terribly heavy within those areas right now, but that could change, and some of the modeling is indicating that. And when we look at the winds at the surface, you notice they're coming out of the south. across a lot of the southern part of the metro, but then coming out of the east right near Houston. And it's in that area where winds are converging, where we expect to see more development, and the modeling actually reflecting that. I'll take this through the next few hours here, and you see right in that area across Harris County, new development, thunderstorms sort of resurging along that area of convergence, and then perhaps moving a little farther north relative to where we saw the worst of it last night and this morning. So it may very well be that northern Harris and Montgomery County, more towards Conroe and the Woodlands on the 45 North Corridor, those areas get in on more of this heavy rain going forward. So, Jackie, certainly that is something we're going to have to watch carefully, but a lot more rain. That's the upshot. A lot more rain on the way here for southeast Texas.
Yeah, and we've got more rain on the way to other parts of the south and eventually into the deep south as what's left of Beta slowly works its way up towards the north and towards the east. So it's going to take its sweet time till late tomorrow before it even enters Louisiana and then eventually moves towards the Tennessee River Valley and into the deep south. We're starting to get some flood reports, minor flooding into southern parts of Arkansas as that tropical moisture gets lifted up. And we've got the jet stream that's approaching, and that's what's going to help eventually pick this up and track it towards the east. On top of that, we've got an area of interest just south of Florida. That surge of tropical moisture will get caught up in all of this and bring some heavier downpours into the southeast by the end of the week and into the weekend. So we have quite a bit of rain still looking forward, not just in Texas, but Nashville, Atlanta, Montgomery, up into the Carolinas could see some heavy downpours. Notice the GFS and the Euro really bringing somewhat of a bullseye here to parts of Mississippi as well as into northern parts of Alabama, which have already had way too much rain so far for the season. We've got quite a few flood gauges across the region that are in flood and forecast to be in flood through the next 5 days.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Here in downtown Galveston, we're along the port. We're seeing a lot of water falling from the sky. That's adding up very quickly on the ground. Take a look at this saddle here just to show you how high some of the water is. This is halfway on the saddle, so this isn't the ground, folks. There's another almost, I'm going to use my boot to gauge, about 10 to 12 inches of water from the ground up to the saddle. But here's the thing, as you go throughout this area of downtown, it's known as the Strand, you actually get different pitches or heights in the ground. So some are higher than others. Some spots are lower than others. So where I am right now, we've hit about maybe 3 or 4, 6 or 7 inches of water in this spot. But then the closer you go to Moody Plaza, that's where the water really slopes down and adds up to 3 or 4 feet. How much rainfall have we seen? Quite honestly, not a lot, perhaps 3 to 5 inches on the whole for the largest rainfall totals. But guess what? It's still raining. So the water that is here, it can't necessarily drain away. And then if you consider this, how heavy does it rain and what period of time? If you get rainfall rates between 3/4 of an inch to an inch or maybe even 1.5 inches in 1 hour, and that rate, that's when the water really starts to add up. And as far as I can see here on my left and on my right, the water is extremely deep. Turn around, find an alternate route.
All right, Tevin, thank you. And of course, we got clobbered by rainfall in some parts of the Houston metro overnight and this morning, and it is far from over. We've got a long way to go, and there could be additional heavy rain and more flooding. Most of this on the south side of the metro, so across the 59 freeway there, as well as along the South Loop, 610 and 288, and down the Gulf Freeway as well. Northern Brazoria County, southern parts of Harris County, and that is precisely where we have seen the creeks rising. This is what you call a hydrograph. So this is showing the water level on the creek at this location over time. And you see this rapid rise of Clear Creek, and this is in Pearland. And that is the very definition of a flash flood right there. When it comes up really rapid like that, that is a flash flood, and expected to crest in minor stage and then just very gradually retreat after that. But as I mentioned, we've got more rain on the way. There are ongoing flash flood warnings right now. One of those on the south side of town, Brazoria, Fort Bend, and Harris County, the other into Harris County. You notice the rain is not terribly heavy in these areas right now. However, we do think that there is potential for the rain to flare up once again. Modeling is indicating that that is a possibility. So we take it into 5 o'clock this evening, and we see a pretty good area of thunderstorms across Harris County, out along the Katy Freeway, 290 as well. And then getting up towards the North Freeway there and moving into Montgomery County, Northern Harris, the Woodlands, and Conroe. So it may be that more heavy rain hits, but in another section of the Houston metro area. Still could see some pretty heavy rain near downtown and Point South, but the modeling seeming to indicate that it's going to be shifting a little bit more off to the north and to the east into Chambers and into Liberty counties and also over into Beaumont. So this is a model blend showing you how much rain is yet to come, and you see that sort of centered on Chambers and Liberty counties, getting over towards Beaumont as well, but some pockets of 3 to 5 in Houston, in Harris rather, and also in Montgomery counties. Here's another model forecast, similar in some ways, but also different. And this is the active model that I showed you a few moments ago. And look at that. That is a big area of 5 to 8 inches across northern Harris and also into southern Montgomery County. And so it could be a lot more than that in some localized areas. So, again, we want to hammer home this idea that it's not over yet. We could very well see a flare-up of this banding across parts of the Houston metro. And so we do not want people to relax in this area. Jackie, over to you.
All right, Carl. Well, we definitely need rain in parts of the west, and it's going to get there eventually, especially into the northwest. A welcome sight to crews that are battling 12 major fires that are burning in the eastern part of Oregon. Portland, you've got some scattered showers in your forecast, especially late tomorrow, and heavier, more persistent rain will move in to round out the week and into the weekend. Meanwhile, down in Los Angeles County, look at this. This is a really dramatic time lapse of billowing smoke from the Bobcat fire. The fire started 2 weeks ago now in the San Gabriel Mountains. It's consumed 109,000 acres, making it one of the largest ever in the county. Containment has gone up a little bit to 17%. The fire has destroyed 29 structures, many of them homes, and is threatening the historic Mount Wilson Observatory yet again. The Portland forecast then showing you that little bit of sunshine there we can see on the camera. So today will be your last pretty decent day to get out. And then the rain comes in, especially late Wednesday. We'll continue with another front arriving by your Friday into Saturday. So this is certainly welcome news to get some of the rain into the fire areas. Widespread amounts around 1 to 2 inches. But notice the higher elevations could see well over that between now and the next week. A little concerned about the risk for some flash flooding into the Olympics as well as into parts of the Cascades, especially over some of the burn areas. So we'll have to watch those burn scars, as it could be just a little bit too much. So high pressure, that big ridge that has just been dominating parts of the west, that's going to break down a little bit as this upper trough begins to swing in. That's going to bring in the flow from the Pacific and bring that moisture up over land here. So we've got a bit of an atmospheric river that's going to be setting up to bring that. We'd like to see that moisture make its way further south into parts of California. Unfortunately, that's not on the table. For the latest stories on climate, the environment, and sustainability, check out Pattern.
A smile has the power to get you feeling all right.
You're watching America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel.
Flooding has been an ongoing event here in Houston. The Weather Channel has been covering breaking news for the better part of this day. as many streets and many bayous are well over their bounds. Streets are flooded. People are needing to be rescued. I'm Justin Michaels, live in Houston right now. And to give you an idea of the Buffalo Bayou, take a look right now. Here is the bayou, folks. And you can see there's typically a walking path right along the edge of the bayou. Well, the water is so high in this one bayou. Take a look at the light post over there, almost to the top of that light post. And what do you think that is? A 8-10 foot light post, probably 10 foot, 12 foot light post. That's how high the water is in the Buffalo Bayou. Just one of the bayous that are well over their banks right now. So a lot of science and a lot of knowledge come from these types of situations. Yes, more than 100 people have needed to be rescued. That's from poor decision making. Make sure you're not driving around barricades. Make sure you're really just staying home because the rain is going to continue to come down. We've been talking with Carl Parker, Jackie Jarris. We do know as these meteorologists are tracking this storm, as Beta is continuing to send bands of rain, they could set up and sit and dump inch after inch after inch, and that's what we're dealing with right now. But Harris County, where Houston is tracking a lot of data from this to try to protect Houston in the future. You can see the crews over here. They have their laptops. They're working under umbrellas. But what they also have is a piece of equipment that's actually out of the water right now, and they put it in the water, and it floats, and it tracks the flow. It tracks the depth. It tracks a lot of data that they can then calculate and better understand how and why these bayous flood, how long it will last, and they keep gathering this data year after year, flooding event after flooding event, and that's what they're doing right now. Truly life-saving work, not just the first responders, but these scientists doing the work to try to bring data to the forefront to help people understand what's going on. But you can see, folks, really incredible how much flooding has happened today, Jackie, and it continues. And Jackie, it stopped raining there for probably a good maybe half hour or 45 minutes, and now for about the last 20 minutes it's been raining again. And Jackie, some of these rain showers that come through are intense, like that kind of rain that there's nothing you can do except get wet. You're just kind of stuck, right?
Yep.
That's the kind of rain that's coming down, really tropical stuff.
Yeah, you can feel the tropical nature of it, I think, in the air. And it's going to be a little bit more showery. I think more intermittent is what we're seeing into the Houston metro right now. And it's actually just off towards your east where our bands are becoming a little bit more persistent. So this is just to the west of the Beaumont area. That's the next big area that I'm going to be watching because these rainfall rates may eventually lead to some localized flash flooding. So no warnings there, but still under a watch for that risk. So there you can see Houston proper. Here's Galveston and Galveston Bay. This is the I-10 corridor here, and this is just kind of that nature of those showers that are a little bit lighter, but at times intense, that continue to spiral into the region. We do still have flash flood warnings that remain in effect. This stays till about 4:30 local time. Hopefully, we can let those expire as that water slowly works its way down, but we can't rule out more banding and more heavier downpours coming in because Beta's just not moving. This is a tropical depression now. Hard to even find much for wind gusts with this thing anymore, but it's really the rain. And so still very likely as even a drop of rain really has nowhere to go. It can't get absorbed into the soil anymore. And the drainage systems are all backed up and full. So it has nowhere to go but up. Unfortunately, our latest high-res models are showing
extends the tropical storm force winds out 400 miles. And there you see the business end of the storm that is now just south of Nova Scotia and Halifax, beautiful city. And they're likely to get a lot of wind here as the storm moves in later today. Here you see the winds on the far western edge of the circulation in Massachusetts, now gusting to over 40 miles per hour in some cases. That'll continue through tonight and overnight. And then those very strong winds beginning to pull away into tomorrow morning and moving up through parts of Nova Scotia as well as into Newfoundland. But in the wake of that storm, we've had this elevated sea and coastal flood warnings in effect in the Northeast and also points much farther south right down the coast. Talking about climatology, as we move into October, we tend to see the tropical activity coming a little bit closer in to the U.S. and we see development in the western part of the Caribbean. And actually, this can be the busiest time of the year in Florida, October. We see more landfalls in South Florida in October than we do in September. We'll have much more on Tropical Storm Beta coming up in a few minutes.
What kind of value?
Continuing breaking news coverage here on the Weather Channel of the ongoing flood threat in Houston, Texas. I'm Justin Michaels live for you above the Buffalo Bayou that is well over its banks, flooding streets and causing more than 100 water rescues today alone. The rain continues to fall. Let's go to Mike Seidel now in Pearland, Texas.
Good afternoon, Justin. Same case here, Clear Creek, well over its banks in Pearland. We'll come back and show you how the water has encroached on some of the homes. Jackie?
All right, Mike, we've got a bird's eye view now of the flooding in Houston from our storm tracker, Charles Peak. Look at the rising water causing several cars and trucks to get stuck. And with more rain coming down now, the threat for more dangerous flooding continues. Carl?
And we expect to see more rain through this afternoon and into this evening. A high risk for flooding across much of the Houston metro area and points farther east around Galveston Bay. We'll have much more on this coming up in just a few minutes.
At Houston right now, 77 degrees, and look at all the moisture in the air. It's tough to see the top of some of the tallest buildings there in Houston. Boy, you've picked up a lot of rain over the last 48 hours. In fact, Houston Hobby has picked up about 10 inches of rain in the last 2 days. It was record-breaking yesterday, so the rain just has nowhere to go, and we've had a lot of flash flooding as a result of that. Houston remains under a flash flood warning for at least another half an hour. We'll have to wait and see if that gets extended or not. We want to head on out to our Justin Michaels. He is live in Houston right now. And Justin, look at that. Just as the rain comes down pouring, it stops once again, huh?
That's exactly right. And I have to tell you, Jackie, there's an entire city of people here that hope that flood warning does expire in the next half hour. Wouldn't that be some good news? Because this water has a long way to go down. Take a look at the Buffalo Bayou. And in fact, Mark Whaley behind the lens. Mark, let's just show what these scientists are doing back here. Let me explain this. We talked about this earlier, and this is a great example of what we're talking about. What they're doing is tracking the flow, the speed, the depth of the Buffalo Bayou. These are from Harris County. And they're trying to better understand the flooding here in this city. The data that little thing is collecting out there, when it finally gets when it hits the current and comes out here, it's going to be collecting all this data that they'll be computing and sending back and working with in the years to come to better understand why and how flooding happens here in Houston, Texas. They're going to use that to hopefully save lives. So, what do they say? Not all heroes wear capes. Well, they're police officers, they're firefighters, and in this case, they're scientists collecting data to understand what's going on. But let's take a look from my unscientific view of what's happening. As far as the Buffalo Bayou goes, take a look over here at these light posts, okay? You can see how high the water is on that light post. What's a typical light post, 10 or 12 feet tall? You can see how high the water is. In fact, we have some ducks. I really think the ducks are probably the only creatures right now that are really appreciating what's happening. Good for you guys. They're going to get caught there in the current as well, but they don't seem to care. But still, a dangerous situation as more than 100 rescues needed to happen today, more than 60 of them coming from the Houston Fire Department, another 40 coming from the police department. And the entire reason that all of them happened, believe it or not, according to the fire chief, is people driving around barricades and right into floodwaters. Not far from where I'm standing right now, there's a place, and we're actually going to show you this coming up within the next half hour on the Weather Channel, where there's no possible way for you to tell how deep the water is. It's right on the other side of this bridge. If you look a little further, you can see there's actually a water marker that shows that water is 6.5 feet deep. And I promise you, when you see it, you're not going to be able to tell if it's an inch deep or 6.5 feet deep. It's really a scary proposition to think that somebody might drive right into that, Mike Seidel, and then all of a sudden find themselves in what could be a deadly situation. All right, so let's head down to Pearland, Texas. Mike Seidel tracking the flood threat there. Mike?
Good afternoon, Justin. Yes, the water has come up here very quickly overnight and this morning. We've had 10 to 12 inches of rain. This is Pearland on the southeast side, and this is Clear Creek way over its banks. We're checking the gauge just downstream in Friendswood, 16 1/3 feet. That's moderate flood stage. And it's forecast to go up to about 19, although, as I mentioned earlier, we've noticed the water has come down on the street as we got out on this boat by about at least 6 inches. And I'm also noticing, if photographer Alston Anderson can go on the driveway, you can see the debris line there. So that's promising. But we have more rain in the forecast. Not a lot on the radar right now, but we're in a flash flood warning for this part of Texas. We've had several warnings here. This one goes until 4:45. flash flood watch for the Metro Houston area goes until tomorrow morning. So we've got to get through tonight, get the center of the circulation of TD, Tropical Depression Beta, out of the way. To put in fact, if you look, so nothing like that. In fact, if you look at these homes like this one here, I'm assuming they don't have basements. There's probably no water in that home, but over here we may have some water under the foundation in this ranch house, and you can see some folks over there at the end of the street venturing out. Now, where's Clear Creek? We're in the boat there. There's the house. We're on Sleepy Hollow Drive, which comes right through here, and Clear Creek goes from left to right, and it goes down to the lake, Clear Lake, and then that goes down into Galveston Bay. All the water drains into the bay either through the Clear Lake area, the Houston Ship Channel goes out past Galveston and through the Bolivar Cut there. So once again, the homes getting awfully close to some of these homes, better in the backyards than the front yards, but these people here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 homes impacted here in Pearland, and fortunately, the water is starting to go down, but again, the forecast from the National Weather Service does bring it up 3 more feet. Not flowing very quickly. Water here is about 3 feet deep. You can see the mailboxes over here in front of this house, and everything else is just kind of status quo. We're hoping that we don't get much more rain on the Clear Creek basin, drainage basin, and we can get this water out of here by sometime later tomorrow night. Right now, it's forecast to crest late this evening and then start falling off. And hopefully by tomorrow, these residents can get back and drive back to their homes. Little light rain falling right now, Jackie, as we continue to keep an eye on all the bayous and creeks, these areas like here in southeast Houston, which is, they're always flood prone when you get a lot of rain. Carl, you lived here, you know the drill here. This is something they go through occasionally. But again, if it does get to 19 feet at the Friendswood Gauge, that would be the 6th highest on record.
Well, let's hope it doesn't do that. And a lot of the modeling indicating that the heaviest of rain going forward could be either east or north. And we'll show you some of those model solutions in a moment. Here you see the last 12 hours and that band that came in. It's amazing when you look at the rain overall, there's not a terrific amount of it along the Texas coast, but it was that band right there that just did not move for hours and hours. And that's why we got this relatively narrow swath of very heavy rain on the south side of the Houston Metro from the Southwest Freeway down across the South Loop there, the Gulf Freeway, and 288 as well. All of those areas being impacted. And as Mike mentioned, the Clear Creek water, the basin there, drainage basin, and there you see the forecast crest in Pearland, expected today at 45 feet. So still some way to go there at Telephone Road in particular. So let's take a look at the current situation, and we've got ongoing flash flood warnings, at least for a little while longer, this afternoon, if they are not extended in parts of Fort Bend and Harris and Brazoria counties and also in Harris County. The rainfall is not that heavy right now, but the modeling indicating that it may actually fatten up some going into this evening. Now, here is one of our high-resolution models, and you'll notice that more of that heavy rain starts to take shape on the east side of Harris County, especially as we get into the overnight and tomorrow morning. And so you look at the output from that model there, and what we see is a pretty good bit of rain on the way for a lot of northern Harris County, as well as into Chambers County and Liberty County. Here is another model, another high-resolution model, similar in a lot of ways, but showing even more on the northwest side of town, and again showing this real ramping up of the intensity of the rainfall. We're not seeing it right now, but a lot of these high-resolution models are indicating that these bands could become a lot more robust in the next several hours here. And so what this implies is more towards, say, the Katy Freeway, northern Harris County, and then the east side of the metro around Chambers and Liberty counties and the north side of the bay there. Look at this going into late tonight, really coming down heavily in northern Harris as well as Montgomery County. So that would imply the Woodlands and Conroe potentially getting in on this exceptionally heavy rain. And then even into tomorrow morning, we still see heavy rain there, Jackie, on the east side of the metro. So when you look at the output from that model, what it's showing us is a really sizable area of 5 to 8 inches in northern Harris and also in Montgomery counties. And so, we can hope that that doesn't happen, but I wouldn't count on it based on what we've seen here in the last 12 hours. Certainly, we saw an overperformance of the rainfall relative to that blend of modeling that we were looking at yesterday.
Yes, certainly a possibility with that slow-moving storm that just doesn't want to get out of there. So this is a scene that we've witnessed many times before. Check this out. Heavy rain creating dangerous driving conditions across the Houston metro area. Mid-morning traffic slowed to a crawl on major highways as drivers navigated through the rain. A number of interstates, highways, and streets have all been blocked by high water. Emergency crews responding to about 100 calls from drivers that have been stuck in the flooding. So those motorists had to be rescued from those stalled cars. Some of the water knee deep, some of it much higher than that. Much of the downtown area has been underwater or surrounded by it, as are adjacent neighborhoods. So the Houston Metro is really taking it on the chin. They've really gotten the brunt of the heavy rainfall out of all of this. The coastal areas had the storm surge flooding. This is now the freshwater flooding from all the rain that just has nowhere to go as the ground's been really saturated. We started out okay because the grounds were dry and we worked our way up, and then the heavy rainfall rates really began to kick in. So it's still very likely we could have renewed flooding in these areas that Carl was just talking about, including Houston stretching down towards Galveston. I'm also really keeping an eye on Beaumont and areas just to the west of there, and that's where we've been seeing some of those heavier downpours. So that red area is also what we would consider a high-risk day. High-risk days don't happen all that often when it comes to the risk of flash flooding, but it does account for about 80% of all damage that happens in flooding. So that really gives you an idea of just how serious of a situation that this is for today. And in terms of deaths that happen as a result of flooding, a lot of those happen in vehicles because people choose to drive into the flood waters. So far, knock on wood, we haven't had any injuries or deaths as a result of this, but annually 35% of deaths due to flooding happen on these high-risk kind of days. It takes less water than you might think to float yourself or to float your vehicle. So keep in mind, even after you get out of your car, you may end up getting knocked off your feet. So generally about 6 inches of rain will knock you, or of water rather, that's moving, will knock you off your feet, but it generally takes about 2 feet of water to float most automobiles, and that would generally be at least an SUV. Some smaller vehicles can float a little bit earlier than that, but we know Houston is so susceptible to flooding. We've had a number of tropical storm and hurricane events that have stalled out across the region, just bringing catastrophic flooding. And here we go again with so much of that happening. And Houston is vulnerable for a number of different reasons, one of which is its close proximity to the Gulf of Mexico, and with Galveston Bay right there, it just taps right into that tropical moisture and continues to put it up over a very urbanized area. So we've got a lot of concrete, we've got a lot of pavement, and not as much ground or soil or vegetation to be able to absorb that up. So the drainage systems is then what you rely on to try and get rid of all that water. And if it's just too much over a shorter period of time, it just can't sustain it. It's also a very flat area, so that flooding can happen very easily as a result of that as well. You hear us talk a lot about Buffalo Bayou. That's one of the big bayous that runs through the city of Houston, and all of the water that falls across the region eventually collects and drains into Buffalo Bayou, which then works its way eventually down into the Gulf of Mexico. So keep that in mind. Even rain to the north of this area eventually begins to drain back in there and work its way down towards the Gulf. And just here's a look at some of the floodwater impacts that we were talking about, the 6 inches that can knock people off your feet. So just remember that mantra that we want you to turn around, don't drown. I know we repeat that over and over again, Carl, but it's so important to keep that in mind because pretty much all the issues we've had today is because people drove into those floodwaters.
Yeah, we see that all the time, unfortunately. And we want to take this story forward now and show you where else we're going to be looking at some heavy rain. There's a live look at Baton Rouge, and we will likely get heavy rain across much of Louisiana over the next couple of days here. So I'll show you a model forecast and how this is probably going to play out going into late tonight. Could be heavy rain developing in Lake Charles. I know you don't want to see that as the recovery continues from Hurricane Laura. We'll find more of that in the overnight and then into early tomorrow morning. That rain coming up into Alexandria, into Baton Rouge, into Monroe then, and then across the Mississippi into western Mississippi, and still even into tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow evening, still a pretty robust area of rain associated with this decaying tropical system. So there's a look at the rainfall to come. And you see that heavy rain on the north side of the Houston metro, but also some pockets of 3 to 5 there in northern Louisiana, as well as into southern Arkansas. Flood watches, by the way, in effect across much of the Louisiana and Texas coast and well inland. And another lingering effect from the storm, we are still seeing elevated water at the coast. There's this large circulation and strong wind that's been going for days now. So an offshore flow and sound side flooding in Port O'Connor and Rockport, and we're seeing an onshore flow and seeing some flooding there in Port Arthur as well as into Eagle Point. So this has also been a part of what has driven the flood threat as water trying to run out, but you've got elevated levels of water in the Galveston Bay there in the Gulf of Mexico. We'll have much more in Beta coming up in just a few minutes.
Joint pain. America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel. Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we.
From this point forward, conditions will continue to deteriorate.
Don't let COVID-19 take your eye off the tropics. This year's threat is more complex and dangerous than ever before.
Remain vigilant, pay close attention to the Weather Channel.
No one can cover this historic hurricane season better than the Weather Channel. Get the information you need to stay safe every day. Storm safety in a pandemic, all season long, right here on the Weather Channel.
And that historic hurricane season does continue. We're still dealing with the remnants of Beta. Yes, Beta coming through Houston, Texas right now. And I'll tell you what, these bands that are coming through are dumping a lot of rain. Good example of that is what's happening here in the Buffalo Bayou. You can see just how flooded it is, flooding out streets, flooding out intersections, causing the need to have more than 100 people rescued. A very dangerous situation here in Houston, Texas, and we know it's not over. Talking with Carl Parker, we know these bands are going to continue to set up throughout this night, possibly even into tomorrow. Could you find yourself with these rising waters again? It certainly is a likelihood at this point. So remember that old saying that we like to throw out there that kind of gets washed away, no pun intended: turn around, don't drown. It means so much because you have no idea what's in those floodwaters. You don't know if it's an inch deep or 6 feet deep, okay? It's very important, and those water rescues are a good example of what I'm talking about. People needed to be rescued, all right? Take a look at what's happening right now. In fact, right over here, Mark Whaley behind the lens. Mark, our little drone out there is floating around collecting all sorts of data. Kind of interesting. Harris County is collecting this data to better understand the flow, better understand what's happening in the Buffalo Bayou, better understand for future flooding events how maybe they can do a better job of preventing them, understanding water flow, understanding how to drain it better. And these scientists are out here doing the good work of capturing that data so they can continue to add it to the lexicon that is Harris County's flood understanding when it comes to this type of an event. These intense rain showers that come in and flood out city blocks. And that's what's happening. In fact, as I'm standing here right now, I'm hearing sirens off in the distance. Is it another water rescue happening? Is that something related to the flooding? It certainly is a possibility. I do know our very own Paul Goodlow is on his way here from somewhere, and he got trapped because of the road closures related to these floods. So it is a real event happening here in Houston. It's a breaking news event, and it continues at this hour as we're trying to get through this, and Beta continues to roll through the city of Houston. So, guys, who am I sending it to? Back into Jackie?
Yeah. Yeah, Justin.
All right, so hey, Jackie, I'll tell you what, we had another really intense bout of rain, and then it basically has leveled off again. It's not really coming down much at all. Drop this hood. But it's amazing, Jackie, how it comes in almost like a wall of water, and it's just intensely raining, and then it stops. And that's what keeps happening here in Houston.
But that's actually a good thing, right, Justin? Because it was the persistent rains that we had last night and overnight that really did a lot of the damage here. So if we can keep it more intermittent, I think we'll be in better shape overall. But we could watch those bands pick back up again. So we'll be back with you in just a little bit. Justin, thanks for staying with us, by the way, while Paul works his way to be able to bring us some reports this evening as well. And that's going to continue through Weather Underground. So make sure you keep it here to the Weather Channel for more updates. Beta, a tropical depression now, just slowly working its way through southeast Texas. It's not going to make its way into Louisiana, we don't think officially, until sometime late tomorrow. So that gives it the opportunity to continue to create these bands that are going to be heavy and could go ahead and just make the flood situation worse in some of these areas. So all those green boxes that you see there around Houston down towards Galveston, those are the flash flood warnings that remain in effect right now. But notice the rainfall trends here with the latest banding. They're not too bad right now. There is that convergence that's going on near that area, so more bands could fire up. We'll have to watch, but we'll take the light stuff. We'll take the intermittent rains that we're getting right now. This has been really the band that's been more persistent as of late across very near where the Texas-Louisiana state line is. That's something we're going to have to keep an eye on. These rainfall rates in the Houston metro generally have been a little bit lighter, so hopefully we can get those flash flood warnings that expire at 4:45 to stay down at that time. Here's a look at what we've had in the last hour. So it's the rainfall rates, how heavy that rain comes down that we really have to watch, and we've stayed less than 1/4 of an inch in most areas. So that's really good news, actually, to see those lighter rainfall rates and amounts, especially when it's coming down on top of what we've already seen. Look at these numbers. This is just staggering. Pearland, where our Mike Seidel is, they've had nearly 13 inches of rainfall in the last 2 days. 13 inches. Houston, 7 inches. That's at Intercontinental. I know Hobby has had more, pushing closer towards the 10-inch mark there. And look at the north side of town. You've had less than an inch in some of these areas, but when we watch these model trends over the next couple of hours and into tonight, it does start to push some of that heavier rain into the north side of the Houston metro area. So we'll have to continue to watch that and wait and see. But I really think especially east is going to be the main area where that potential will lie. 3 to 5, maybe even 6 inches of rain possible in this gold area. But notice south and southwest of Houston where some of the worst of the issues are. Our latest rainfall forecast is showing an inch or possibly less. So the flood threat remains high. Keep this in mind as the sun goes down for tonight. Conditions will be very dangerous, and you definitely do not want to travel here. We could also see some flooding in parts of Louisiana. More to come. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Weather Channel, a special coverage of tracking Beta, now a tropical depression. Thanks for joining us. I'm meteorologist Paul Gallo, live in downtown Houston, very close to the University of Houston downtown. And I'm standing over a bridge over Buffalo Bayou. We were, I guess, upriver yesterday evening, probably a couple of miles or so, and this was just becoming a problem. It's starting to rise 3 or 4 feet. Now it's easily perhaps 10 feet or even more higher than it was just maybe 14 hours ago. It's all because of this rain here that's falling on what I'm standing on, concrete and asphalt, which does nothing but run it off. Again, this bayou, Buffalo Bayou, goes right through downtown Houston and eventually empties into the Galveston Bay and then into the Gulf of Mexico. But you see, roads have been closed up. Even getting here, had to navigate some closed roads. And already, we're talking more than 100 people have had to be rescued, and almost all of them exclusively on the roads. They drove into flood-covered roadways and then got into trouble. And even big pickup trucks. A lot of people are like, well, why would you drive your truck? Well, you know, trucks tend to sit a little higher. But guess what? This is now higher water over many roadways, and that's getting even people who normally could navigate maybe a foot and a half of water on the roads. Now they're getting into trouble, and many people got in trouble late last night. We had heavy rain that fell across especially the south and southwest and southeast side of towns last night, and people driving, coming back from third shift or going to third shift, they got in trouble last night and early this morning as they navigated the roadways. We are still under a flash flood warning. It goes for another hour or so. Would not be surprised to see that even extend as we have more of the rain bands come this way. And as any one of those rain bands can kind of quickly give us a quick half-inch to maybe an inch of rain, and that's going to quickly cause everything to rise as well. This is called flash flooding. You look at one point, you might be fine. You come back an hour later, all of a sudden the water might have risen not just a few inches, but a couple of feet. And that could be the difference of life or death in the situation. Houston, unfortunately, no stranger to flooding, and we're seeing more ongoing. But the key is, when will we finally see this overall circulation flowing this moisture in from the Gulf of Mexico leave the Houston area? Because last night when Beta made landfall, Houston was still like 90 miles from the center. Today, we're about 65 miles from the center. So it really hasn't moved that much in terms of getting to and getting past the Houston area. Until that does so, we still will have this perhaps these bands of heavy rain coming in. Some people call them feeder bands. They don't really feed the storm. They're just the spiraling bands that is a circulation of a tropical storm or a hurricane, or I guess in this case a tropical depression that continues to bring us more rain. Right now, the rain isn't currently falling where I'm standing, but give it a couple of minutes, Carl. We'll see perhaps another potential downpour and deluge come across this area. And, you know, I was watching you earlier this afternoon. It's now becoming a problem a little farther north of town. Places like the Woodlands and Humble, they barely got a half inch, but now they could have some of those heavy rain bands set up there. Some of the models are saying that this problem is going to be shared across this metro area of about 7 million people.
Yeah, that really is the worry, Paul, because when you look at where the rain fell here in the last couple of days, you can see that it really was concentrated on the south side of town there. So we got water level rises on Buffalo Bayou, as well as Clear Creek coming down into Brazoria County and right down into Friendswood. That's where we've seen a lot of that significant flooding. But the question is, are we going to see heavier rain on the north side of the metro going forward? Right now, there are some storms that are beginning to materialize near downtown. Ongoing flash flood warnings here, including Harris County. And you can see where those storms are developing from downtown and on northwest, getting up towards the 290 corridor and just north of the Katy Freeway. The reason why it's happening right there is because you have converging winds coming from the south indicated in orange, coming out of the east there indicated in blue. Where those winds are coming together, that's where we get lift in the atmosphere. So it's no accident that thunderstorms are developing right there in that area where there is maximum lift right now. And the modeling is indicating that that will continue to happen and maybe even step up here over the next several hours. Here you see our high-resolution model showing a pretty substantial rain developing across Harris County as well as into Montgomery County, points farther east, Chambers and Liberty counties, and across the bay there. And then watch as we go through several hours, you notice that a lot of these same areas are getting hit very, very hard hour after hour. Not as much on the south side of the metro, more on the north side of the metro, and then also farther east across I-10 and into Beaumont, and then even into the overnight. We've still got heavy rain showing up. So here is our model blend showing you the rainfall to come. Sizable area of 3 to 5 inches of rain with pockets of more than 5 inches of rain across Harris County, especially north of I-10 and over into Liberty and Chambers counties as well. We'll have much more on Beta coming up in just a few minutes.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Welcome back to Metro Houston. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel. This is the suburb of Pearland, Texas. Southeast side, Clear Creek is out there. The water has come way over its banks because we've had so much rain from Beta. It was a storm, now it's a tropical depression, and the center is going to come somewhere near Houston tonight. Once it goes by tomorrow morning, we'll see this rainfall finally shut off, but the damage has been done. This is Storyfield Drive, and it goes all the way through there, but you can't get there from here because it's too deep, about 2 or 3 feet of water. You can see the road turning to the right, the water around this house. Looks like it's in pretty good shape, but look in the distance. We were out there earlier on a boat, and there was about, I think I counted 5 homes where the water is up to the foundation or to the front steps. I don't think there's any significant water damage. Thank goodness. Right now we're at about 16 1/3 feet. We've seen the water go down, although the forecast from the Weather Service says it's going to go up about another 3 feet. We're hoping that's not the case. That would put it at 19 feet, and that's about 6 feet below the all-time record set by Harvey. No surprise in 2017. So imagine the water over 9 feet higher right now. I'm about 6 feet. So add 6 plus 3, it was up here during Harvey. So that kind of puts Harvey in perspective as the highest point the water's ever gotten at the gauge on Clear Creek in nearby Friendswood. So lots of water, still some showers right now. We're under a flash flood warning, and a flash flood watch goes until tomorrow morning. Once we get Beta through here, we're going to get drier weather, and we'll see the water recede. Expected to crest tonight, by the way, later on this evening, then slowly go down during the day tomorrow night, and then into Thursday. Let's go back to the Weather Channel, get more on what's ahead for eastern Texas. We got more rain going into the lower Mississippi Valley, including Lake Charles and also the areas around New Orleans, Carl, where, by the way, I think it was day before yesterday, it was actually New Orleans and southeast Louisiana having worse weather than we had in central Texas along the Gulf Coast because of that fetch and that big giant circulation from Beta.
Yeah, big gradient wind there across the northern Gulf. Mike, thank you so much. And let's take a look at what's happened here in the last 24 hours. And an important thing to note is that tropical cyclones, when making landfall, have been slowing since 1949 by about 16% in the Atlantic. The forward speed has slowed. And so that's a really important part of this story. When they slow down, the impacts last that much longer. You get that much more heavy rain. If you've got a front that comes down that's a strong front, it grabs it up, takes it right along, and the rainfall amounts aren't nearly as high. So we saw just incredible rainfall across the south side of the Houston metro. And where Mike is in Pearland, here you see Clear Creek getting up into moderate stage, and it's slowly going to be declining, assuming that we don't get a whole lot more rain there. The modeling indicating that we might see a shift in where the heaviest of rain is going forward, more towards the northern half of the Houston metro. Now, here you see the current radar picture and flash flood warning in effect there for Brazoria and Fort Bend and Harris County. Here, by the way, is Pearland. That's where Mike is right now, and just some spotty showers coming through right now. And you notice a little more persistent area of rain that has developed from near downtown and out to the northwest, just north of the Katy Freeway. And again, modeling indicating that that might be the area that is targeted for the next batch of heavy rain. This is one of our high-resolution models, and I want you to notice where the heaviest of rain sets up. It's not as much on the south side, not as much in Brazoria County, but more towards northern Harris County, Montgomery County, and then farther east into Chambers and Liberty counties, and then just continues for hours and hours tonight across a lot of those very areas, while also expanding eastward into Beaumont, and then even into the overnight. We still see heavy rain across a lot of the region. So looking at the model forecast, and I'll tell you some of the individual high-resolution models are even more aggressive than this. This is a model blend, but Jackie, what this is showing is that we are far from out of the woods there in Houston.
Yeah, if we could just get some of this rain across parts of the west, this is where they really need it. And some spots are going to get it before the week is out. So even just the clouds and the moisture, a welcome sight for crews battling 12 major fires burning in the eastern part of Oregon. Portland will see some scattered showers by late tomorrow, but heavier and more persistent rain will move in by the end of the week. In the meantime, down in Los Angeles County, a dramatic time lapse of the billowing smoke from the Bobcat fire. The fire started 2 weeks ago in the San Gabriel Mountains. It's consumed 109,000 acres, making it one of the largest ever in the county. It's now 17% contained. It's destroyed 29 structures, many of them homes, and threatening the historic Mount Wilson Observatory. The Pacific Northwest, you are the ones that are going to get in on the rain. Unfortunately, the south and into California, not so much. No dice there. But Portland, this will be a refreshing change for you, getting in some rain showers. Some parts in Oregon haven't seen rain in nearly 100 days. That would include you in Medford. In fact, today is day 98, but I do think when you would hit 100, which would be Thursday, you're going to get that rain coming in. There you can see the forecast for rainfall. This is generally from the Cascades westward towards the coast. We could get a little too much into the higher elevations. We got to watch the burn scars. Good to see this upper low swinging in. We'll have another front arriving by Friday.
Her, neither do we.
From this point forward, conditions will continue to deteriorate.
Don't let COVID-19 take your eye off the tropics. This year's threat is more complex and dangerous than ever before.
Remain vigilant, pay close attention to the Weather Channel.
No one can cover this historic hurricane season better than the Weather Channel. Get the information you need to stay safe every day. Storm safety in a pandemic, all season long, right here on the Weather Channel. In America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat. Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel.
Welcome back to the Weather Channel and our continuing coverage of Beta, now a tropical depression. I'm meteorologist Paul Goodlow in downtown Houston. You can see behind me, this is Buffalo Bayou. It's definitely a lot higher. In fact, we were at the Buffalo Bayou Park last night, and the bayou was running about 3 or 4 feet higher than it was normally, around 7 feet. Now it's at 27 plus feet. If you look in that direction, you see the Ferris wheel. That's by the aquarium, and the actual stream gauge I'm getting that measurement from is maybe another mile west of there as well. The bayou flows starting way back towards Katy, and it basically runs west to east, kind of paralleling Memorial Drive, Allen Parkway. Both of those roadways are not passable right now. There is water covering various spots. What will be flood stage? It could get there later on today. It's what's called action stage. The areas that are getting flooded right now are basically some minor roadways, but mainly parkland. That's why they build the parkland along the bayou, so that can flood and you don't have major damage there. But it's getting close to actually getting in flood stage. But even that is still going to be maybe 10 feet or more below where it was 3 years ago with Harvey. So while this is bad, we know it has been worse. But the concern is it will continue to get worse. And right now, I guess because of the pandemic, you're not seeing
is a ton of water. Now, a little silver lining, I always try to find them when I'm doing reporting here, and you can see this rock on the ground. We put that there just to track how far the water either would go up or come down. Well, that's where the water line was when we were here about 2 hours ago. It's fallen all the way down to here. So that's some good news. What does that mean as far as depth? Well, take a look at that gauge down there. There's a flood gauge right on that upright for the I-10 overpass there. When we first got here today, it was at 7 feet, actually 7 feet of water in this this kind of messy interchange right here. Now you can see it's below the 6 foot mark. So the good news is, yes, it's coming down. The bad news is there's more rain to come. Carl Parker, Paul Goodlow, Jackie Jarris, everybody covering this. Mike Seidel, everybody's tracking this, Jackie, because we do know those bands coming in from Beta can set up and sit and dump and bring this water right back up again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we're watching an area that includes the Houston Metro, parts of Galveston Bay, all within this area right here where the sun has come out, where we had a break in the rainfall, and it's looking increasingly favorable that we could get some heavy rainfall rates in here in the next couple of hours that could lead to additional flooding. So don't let your guard down now, because it looks like we've improved. because we are not out of the woods yet as Beta is moving very slowly. We just got in our latest advisory, the 4 o'clock Central Time, 5 o'clock Eastern Time advisory with Beta. Winds down to 30 miles per hour. Winds really haven't been an issue at all with this storm. It's just that slow nature. It has picked up a little bit of forward speed. We've been going at 2 miles an hour all day, and now we're seeing a little bit. I mean, any progress certainly is good news there. There you can see the active radar right now, along with the visible satellite, and you can see some of those dark pockets in there. Those are the breaks in the cloud cover that I was talking about that's creating more instability. We still have our flash flood warnings, which remain in effect until the bottom of the next hour. We'll have to wait and see if that gets extended, but flooding still very likely in this dark red area. Carl, this includes all of the Houston metro, so concerned about flooding going forward, especially after dark tonight.
Yeah, we need to watch that carefully. And we are also still watching a massive storm off the northeast coast. We just got the new advisory on Hurricane Teddy, now down to a Category 1, but this is an enormous storm. Tropical storm force winds extending out 400 miles from the center, and the center of that storm now approaching Nova Scotia. It's going to be a long night and morning there. Seeing some very strong winds coming into New England right now, gusting to 30 to 40 miles per hour in eastern parts of Massachusetts. We'll find more of that through tonight, and then it's slowly going to be improving into tomorrow as the storm continues up into the Maritimes, but an ongoing coastal flood threat in New England and points much farther south right down the coast and into Florida as well. We're going to continue our coverage of tropical storms, tropical depression Beta coming up here in just a few minutes with Mike Bettis and Alex Wilson. Stay tuned for that.
Next on Weather Underground, a significant flood threat unfolding as Beta continues to fuel heavy rain. Slow-moving tropical depression Beta already dumping more than a foot of rain across portions of Texas. That includes Houston, leaving roadways flooded and motorists stranded. We've got live coverage for you as Beta continues to produce intense bands of torrential rainfall and dangerous flash flooding into the night.
And with so many storms and changes in severity from forecast to forecast, is warning fatigue setting in as this never-ending 2020 hurricane season just barrels on? We discuss how to avoid falling victim to the fatigue and the storms. Next on Weather Underground. In Houston Metro, well, it's going underwater as Beta moves through. Hours of heavy rain have triggered flash flooding. Thanks for joining us here on Weather Underground. I'm Mike Bettis.
I'm Alex Wilson. Yeah, we are with you until 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central as we track it all for you. It's been a tough day in Houston as they are once again been deluged by some heavy rain, stricken by flooding, downpours causing water to rise across the city. And so that's left streets impassable, highways unusable. Motorists have been stranded. Officials had warned people to stay off the roads. And Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo has issued a stern rebuke this afternoon to the people who tried it anyway.
Sedan is not a submarine. Your minivan is not magical. So stay off the roads right now and make sure you do so until the threat passes.
Well, here's what we know at this hour. Right now, Beta is a tropical depression, but it remains a major flood threat to Texas, also to Louisiana. More than 10 million people remain under a flash flood watch, with 2.6 million under a flash flood warning. Pumps, they're already operating to keep floodwaters out of Grand Isle, Louisiana, and 213 coastal floodgates were closed this morning in Louisiana. We look at what has been happening across the metro area, and it's just been a drenching rainfall as these areas of heavy torrential rain set up in a very, very flood-prone city. So this storm made landfall late yesterday, around 10 o'clock local time. That's Central Time, 5 miles to the north of Port O'Connor. So that was Beta's landfall with winds 45 miles an hour, pressure 999 millibars. But then we saw the rain really begin to increase in its intensity and its longevity over the Houston area, leaving a lot of those roadways completely impassable and leaving a lot of people, a lot of vehicles underwater. As we heard the judge say, your car is not magic. Unfortunately, people were leaving very, very late and into the early morning hours, and unfortunately found out those water-covered roadways were way too deep. Look at these rainfall totals. It's generally been the west and south side of the city where we've seen some of the greatest totals. Just over 8 inches just south of downtown Houston. You get into some of those communities, those suburbs on the south and southwest side of town, that's where we've seen a foot or more of rainfall, Mike, coming down. So anytime you get rain like that in a place like Houston that's exceptionally flood prone, you're going to have huge problems.
So let's take you right to that problem. Let's turn to meteorologist Paul Goodlow. He's joining us live from Houston tonight. Paul, you said some of these rain bands that set up just would not quit here. Double-digit rainfall told us. What's the result been today, and what's the thinking going forward tonight? This has got to have a lot of people anxious tonight.
For sure, Mike, because again, anytime you talk about flooding in Houston, a lot of people go back to 3 years ago with Harvey, and even longer term residents go back to Tropical Storm Allison, which also kind of sat here and gave us heavy rain. And we're in the north side of downtown. You got University of Houston downtown campus here. Looking north, look at the floodwaters on the entrance ramps to I-45 North and the tollway going north. A lot of cities like Houston have the toll roads, express lanes to get people out of downtown. We haven't seen as much traffic because of the pandemic the last 6 months or so, but basically that's where people would come over Travis Street and head right north to the suburbs. And to the west here, this is Buffalo Bayou. When I was with you guys last night on Weather Underground, I was about maybe a mile and a half due west here on Buffalo Bayou Park. The bayou at that point was up about 3 or 4 feet. Now it's up about, say, 20 feet. So 20 more feet, I should say, from where it was yesterday. In fact, we cannot even get to where we were last night. Parts of Allen Parkway, Memorial Drive, covered in water, and just cannot drive through there safely unless you have a huge high water vehicle. And that's what even the city of Houston has been doing. They've been having these high water rescue vehicles getting people out of harm's way, because the people who have gotten into trouble, mainly people who have driven into floodwaters because they just don't think, oh, I can get through there. And I even want to show one of the crew vehicles. This is a truck. Lots of trucks, pickup trucks here in Texas. And yes, normally you can get through this. A little inside baseball. When we come out here on storms, especially hurricanes, we usually get full-size SUVs for the point where they have a little bit more clearance than, say, a compact car. So you want to have that clearance just in case the water starts rising around you. We try not to drive through areas we know are going to flood. But even this, when you got the water getting higher and higher, it's going to flood something that's kind of front heavy, and you're going to start floating. Again, even pickup trucks, you see, I saw the pictures. Charles Peak had his drone flying, and you see the trucks nose first because the tail end is kind of light in the rear there, so that tends to float if you get too much water there. So almost everyone who's had to be rescued today is not from a home or even an apartment. It's because they were in their car. So turn around, don't drown. Right now, Buffalo Bayou is in what's called action stage, and it's about a foot from flood stage, minor flood stage. So right now it's just flooding parkland. It's not flooding into businesses yet. And yes, some of the side streets, but no major flooding impacts from Bayou except Buffalo Bayou, except maybe perhaps you have to find another way home tonight. But the concern is what's on the radar. More bands of this tropical moisture being fed in here because of what's left of beta, that circulation. Still, maybe a day away from passing Houston. We can't wait till that happens, because then we'll start hopefully squeezing off and shutting off that tap of tropical moisture, which you can still see. But it's not just here in downtown Houston. Some of the southern suburbs got hit really hard last night, especially even just 24 hours ago. Let's check in with my colleague, Mike Seidel. He is in Pearland area, which is about maybe a half hour south of where I am. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Paul, you are right. Last night and this morning, it came down in buckets, over a foot of rain in this area. This is Pearland, and this is the Clear Creek back here flowing left to right, but it's taken over a lot of real estate. Down the road, Sleepy Hollow, we've got about 6 homes where the water has come up to the front door. I think they're in pretty good shape, though. But right now, they're still forecasting the creek to go up another 2.5 feet just downstream at Friendsland. That would put it at 19 feet, moderate flood stage, but just 6 feet below Harvey. But that's a big deal. If you add, you add 9 feet to where I'm standing, so you got 6 feet right here, and add 3 more, and that gives you an idea where the water was when Harvey peaked. And we've got a family that was here when Harvey came through 3 years ago. This is Mara Williams with Mallory, Mari, and Macy. Did I get it all right? Yes, sir. Well, good evening, ladies. And first to Mom. Last night, the rain, you saw the creek rising. You went out back with a flashlight. What did you see?
It was about 3 a.m. and it was right at the banks. So it was starting to kind of creep out toward us, which was a little unnerving. Kind of made it hard to sleep. And then when we got up this morning, it was starting to creep into the backyard, and obviously down here is higher than what we're looking at, but but definitely unsettling.
Now, how do you feel right now that we've seen it actually go down here, but there's more water coming downstream, plus there's a forecast of more rain, so that's why right now they're forecasting to go up another 2.5 feet.
Still a little unnerving. It has gone down. It was up to the trampoline, so about half up in our backyard. So the thought of more rain, I know that with Harvey, once it got to about the trampoline, it didn't take very long to get up to the house because it's pretty level back there. So once it kind of fought its way up the creek and out the banks, it didn't, like I said, it didn't take very long. So the thought of more rain is not a good thought.
I can understand. And give us a quick synopsis of Harvey. What happened to your home? How long were you out of it?
The first night with rain, water came up to the back door. Next morning it went back down. We came back, and then when the long rain started, it didn't take long to start creeping into the house. We were out about 3 days while the water went down, and then it was just kind of demo mode and trying to get, start the cleanup process.
Remediation. Okay, let's bring in the ladies. Mallory, Maury, and Macy. You were out back. What did you see today in your backyard?
We saw a fish.
You know what kind of fish it was?
No, we just saw it flop.
Flop out of the water? Did you see any snakes? We saw some snakes out here earlier.
Not that I
No snakes?
I haven't seen any snakes.
Well, that's good. So do you have memories of Harvey 3 years ago?
Yes.
And what do you remember from Harvey?
Very scary. I remember I woke up that morning and I always look out my blinds, the window in my room, and I saw that our house was literally surrounded by water. So I went out screaming.
Oh my gosh.
Because I was in first grade. So I went out screaming out of my room. And Mallory, she had already been in the room with our mom.
Right.
So then I went screaming into there, screaming, "We are surrounded by water." So then my mom was like, "It's okay. No reason to worry," or stuff like that.
The voice of reason. Calm. So then you got out and everybody obviously is okay. Well, we hope this water doesn't go up another 2.5 feet, but you're fine at this point. We hope everything is fine.
Yeah, hopefully there's enough people already affected down further. So just grateful it's not us, but feel for them. So.
Well, thanks for joining us, the Williams family, Mom Mara, Mallory, Maury, and Macy. Dr. Rick Knabb, who has spent a few days in Houston. And Dr. Knabb, just thinking about the water being 9 feet deeper from where I'm standing just really is amazing. I just can't even imagine. It's bad enough as it is now. But then again, we had 10 to 12 inches of rain. Harvey's amounts for at least 3 or 4-fold.
Yeah, there was a much larger volume of water that fell over southeast Texas in Harvey, but still a lot of folks getting some very serious flooding, some getting into structures in parts of the Houston area. Those folks among the fortunate ones at the moment. It's still a category slow storm, east-northeast at 5 miles an hour, even though it's tropical depression. This is the last advisory that will be issued by the National Hurricane Center. It's an inland depression, pretty confident it's not coming back out over water to become a tropical storm. So the future advisories will come from WPC, Weather Prediction Center. Probably stays a depression for another day or so, still tapping into some Gulf moisture and instability, and then the remnant low of it will bring moisture into the lower Mississippi Valley into the southeast. So there's still moist, unstable air, some available energy still coming into southeast Texas. So that's why, even though the cloud tops are not really tall, really cold, not really deep thunderstorms, there's enough instability, enough moisture there at the low levels, and with a slow-moving storm, training going on, we're still getting some decently high rain rates, and it's raining over the same area. So that's why we still have flash flood warnings in the same areas that we have all day in the Houston downtown area and to the east, north, and northwest sides. That goes till 4:30 local time, but the rain is still coming down. I would not be surprised at all if this gets extended. And then on the south side, where we've had the heaviest rainfall totals, it's coming down in buckets, in spots, but not everywhere. But again, more rain is on the way. Over 7 inches just in the past 6 hours there, closer to downtown than what we had last night, where it was largely on the south side. Now, we're getting still over 1 inch per hour rain rates downtown Houston and out I-10 on the west side. And these are some of the most recent reports that we've got. Impassable roads, the medical center area near Rice University, a number of water rescues performed. And then that south side, we did get water getting into some homes in that subdivision. So So this has not just been a problem on the roads. It has been a problem in the homes as well. And we've got the possibility for, say, another half a foot of rain, especially in the north side and, getting over to Beaumont, Port Arthur, and Orange. And the future radar, Alex, we don't like to see this persistent banding there in the Houston area, increasingly getting over to Beaumont, Port Arthur, and Orange. But by tomorrow morning, midday, lunchtime, it starts to get out of the Houston area.
All right, I want to walk you through, town by town, city by city here, timing for when we can expect some of the heaviest rain still in our area. How about Lake Charles? We'll start there as we watch some of those heavier bands begin to set in across the area through the evening. Lake Charles could find yourselves at times between the bands, but at times, I think especially as we get into early Wednesday, you'll likely begin to pick up on those rain showers, and it sticks around into the afternoon. Again, surrounding communities, areas along I-10 will get in on some of that heavy rainfall, but accumulation should be kept in check by the fact that they will be kind of repositioning, moving from west to east. So we've got 1 to 2 inches very likely for Lake Charles over to Lafayette. Could see some higher totals as we head up into the northeastern part of the state. Now we look towards Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, that little conglomeration of the three. Texarkana, one of the spots, Shreveport as well. We move into this evening and overnight, and you can see the rain showers will be persistent at times. I think into tomorrow morning, we'll see it lighten up a little bit, but still, Mike, we'll be dealing with showers.
Come our way. Atlanta, boy, the party is
his most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel. Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we.
From this point forward, conditions will continue to deteriorate.
Don't let COVID-19 take your eye off the tropics. This year's threat is more complex and dangerous than ever before.
Remain vigilant, pay close attention to the Weather Channel.
No one can cover this historic hurricane season better than the Weather Channel. Get the information you need to stay safe every day. Storm safety in a pandemic, all season long, right here on the Weather Channel.
Once again, we're back live here in the suburb of Pearland, Texas, and you can see what happens when you get about a foot of rain from Beta. Good news is the water has come down, and that's what we like to see, although the official forecast, the hydrograph on the creek at Friendsland says it's going to go up another about 2.5 feet. We'll see how that shakes out. Rain in the forecast. We've got about a half dozen homes in the distance where the water has come up right to the front door, but it hasn't gone much higher. Let's go to Charles Peak. He's shown up on the scene. Good to see Mr. Peak here with his drone. And there's the view from above. The creek now about 16.5 feet. It's in moderate flood stage. If it does get up to 19 feet, that would be the 6th highest crest. Highest crest, no surprise, Harvey 3 years ago. 24 feet and change. So the water actually was about 8.5 feet higher than it is right now. Imagine that's why all these homes were flooded out. Now, Charles will take the drone over towards Clear Creek, and you can get a sense is we're going downstream to Clear Lake and then eventually dumps in towards Galveston Bay and the Gulf of Mexico. We do have more rain in the forecast. Now, the flash flood warning in this area of Houston, southeast, southwest, and west side ends in about 25 minutes. We'll see if they extend that. Nothing imminent in this area in Pearland and Friendswood. But the flood watch, flash flood watch, goes until tomorrow morning, Dr. Knabb. So we've got to get the center of the circulation, which, by the way, it made landfall 5 miles north of Port O'Connor, and now it's 40 miles north of Port O'Connor. 18 hours later, it went in. Now it's coming back south, and then it's going to move northeast. Very slow-moving system.
Yeah, it's moving in just different directions, only at about 3, 4, 5 miles an hour. So, again,
right.
Category slow systems, they're so annoying and they're so destructive when it comes to water, even tropical depressions. Now, if you look at the last 24-hour infrared loop, you know, the colors are the cold cloud tops, the tallest thunderstorms, and you only see a few bursts near the center, and in the Houston area, not a whole lot. So, you know, you look on the visible imagery, this is a lot of shallow topped convection, but it's just loaded with moisture at the low levels, and with a slow mover, it just keeps persistently producing rain in the same areas. Now, what this could have been an even bigger, more prolific rain producer over a larger area. But all that orange in there, that's dry air, and the southwesterly motion of the clouds is wind shear that allowed the dry air to get into it. And you see the blow-up of thunderstorms over the Gulf on Sunday. Let's look at the radar, how this could have been so different. So here we are with the part over land. But just a couple days ago, when this was over water, watch this on Sunday. Watch in here how you get a mid-level eye feature starting to form right in there. And we thought it could be off to the races, but that shear and dry air got in and knocked down the overall structure of the system. And so while Harvey came ashore as a Category 4, it was still a tropical storm when it did most of its rainfall in the Houston, Galveston, and Beaumont, Port Arthur orange areas. Beta similarly doing most of its damage as a tropical storm. But the big difference is the convective structure of Beta, just not what Harvey had. And Beta won't be hanging out quite as long as Harvey did, Alex. So, you know, it always could have been worse, but it's, again, been pretty bad with a slow mover.
Not ideal, but as you point out, could have been much worse. Then we've got a beast of a storm, Hurricane Teddy. You can see the Atlantic, what it's doing there in Nova Scotia. The massive Category 2 Teddy, it's quickly approaching land, and it's bringing coastal effects not just to the Canadian Maritimes, but also to the U.S. East Coast. We look at Hurricane Teddy right now, a 90-mile-per-hour Category 1 hurricane. This thing is off the coast of New England, but we can see some of that outer cloud cover getting its way to Boston, portions of even Vermont and eastern Connecticut. But the waves, the surf, the coastal effects, those are going to be what we're really feeling. Those are what we're really feeling here in the U.S. This is moving north at 16 miles an hour, so heading closer to a place like Halifax, expecting this to move on shore off to the east of Halifax, eventually weakening, but still could be bringing some pretty strong winds and, of course, the coastal issues to parts of Canada as well. Dr. Knabb, we've talked about this so many times. Storm doesn't have to make landfall to it to have serious effects.
No, and this is such a big beast. The pressure's below 960 millibars. It's huge. So it's really churning up the Atlantic Ocean. And again, between that and the high pressure that's been bringing our good weather to the eastern U.S., look at that really strong flow into the southeast coast of the United States. So we've got a lot of problems down in South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, in addition to the waves that are impacting the mid-Atlantic, Northeast, and the coast of Maine. Now, it will get better as Teddy moves along, but the waves are really high right now, a really, really high risk of rip currents today that could last into tomorrow. And look at here, Portland, Maine, approximately 1 foot of inundation on the Portland Pier at the time of high tide, and all of these coastal problems down in the southeast. We're back to tell you the latest is on Beta.
Millions of people who call the Houston metro area home are in that bullseye for dangerous flash flooding throughout the night tonight. Thanks for being with us here on Weather Underground. I'm Mike Bettis.
I'm Alex Wilson. Mike, a drone giving us a view of those waterlogged streets of Houston. Perhaps no real better way to get a sense of the scope of the flooding, the extent of the flooding. This has affected the city of Houston, its suburbs, and also some neighboring towns, places like Galveston. Beta, a tropical depression now, but unfortunately, as we have seen with this storm and storms of the past, you do not need the most powerful hurricane in the world to bring a lot of rainfall that's going to cause problems, particularly, Mike, in very, very flood-prone Houston.
And that is Houston's kind of MO these days, isn't it? Let's get you the latest on that flooding. Turn to meteorologist Paul Goodlow. He is live in Houston for us tonight. Paul, we've seen a lot of the creeks and streams come bank full there, come out of their banks even. Maybe a brief reprieve right now, but as soon as more rain comes back in, we're going to just repeat what we did last night.
You know, you wait a couple of minutes, it dumps rain, then it stops. Light rain right now, more rain. I mean, it's on again, off again. But you're right, Mike. I have noticed, this is Buffalo Bayou behind me. We're here last night, maybe about a mile and a half farther west. I've noticed the water come down in some areas, maybe more than a foot. But I mean, this is still well out of its normal embankment of this bayou here. But it's still a concern. If you look at the radar, you can still see these bands of tropical moisture spiraling in from the Gulf of Mexico, all because of circulation of tropical depression Beta, bringing this moisture on in here. Now, if you're farther in the interior, you're not seeing a whole lot, but we're concerned about these bands. A heavy band just ran through downtown. I'm feeling the rain pick up a little bit more, but now we're seeing this move on the northwest corridor up through, say, up to Cypress and Cypress Creek, up towards Jersey Village. Those areas, seeing those moderate to heavy rain bands come that way, and they can quickly drop a ½ inch to maybe 1.5 inches of rain before you know it. So even some of the creeks there will start to quickly rise as well. But also farther to the east, this is one of the concerns now, we're seeing some heavy rain bands set up and move through Orange and Beaumont and Port Arthur, areas that were hit with Imelda last year, but also with Hurricane Laura just last month. And eventually those bands could make it into Lake Charles and Cameron, Louisiana. That's also another concern because you're already dealing with the aftermath of a major hurricane making landfall. Now you have potential heavy rain coming through as well. And from time to time, we might even see some blue sky overhead, which is like the worst thing to have because then you have some sunshine heating the ground heats the air starts to rise rapidly. We have more convection and heavy rain coming down. So that's the big concern. It is muggy out. It is tropical air. Air temperature might be 78, but the dew point's like 75. So it's tropical air and can quickly produce some heavy downpours. And the biggest concern is how slowly it's moving. I want to bring in Dr. Nab, and I love how you call this, it's moving so slowly. It's moving at slow miles per hour, because that's basically what it is. 2 to 5 miles per hour. That's either a slow walk or a slow jog. I mean, it's not moving anywhere quickly.
Yeah, so the fact that it's a depression shouldn't make anybody feel any better. Oh, just a depression, I can get back out on the roads. No, the problems are ongoing, and in some places, like you mentioned, northwest of town and out in the Beaumont area, the rain rates are escalating again. So, and look at I-10 going west all the way toward Gonzales. It's raining pretty hard. So, and you know, heads up in the Beaumont, Port Arthur, Orange area overnight tonight. The flood problems could really start to ramp up. So let's take a look at our flash flood warning. The one for downtown Houston and heading northwestward and northward, that has been extended once again until 7 local time. And look at, as Paul was mentioning, you go out 290 out to the northwest. That's the corridor that's getting the heaviest rain right now. And if you look at the hourly rates, 1.5 inches per hour. Folks, and I know it's not coming down as hard as it was earlier today and last night in many places, but it's still coming down in proverbial buckets. And this is just going to add to the flash flood problem. So this is still important that you stay off the roads in this flash flood warning area. And we'll have to see, there's still some light to moderate rain coming down in this warning area on the south side of town. But because there's so much water around, that might have to be extended as well. 7.5 inches, not far from downtown Houston, just in the last 6 hours. And this is one model depiction that's along I-10 and northward and extending eastward over to Beaumont. That is where we're expecting the heaviest rain over the next day or so. And then tomorrow into Thursday, it heads east.
Let's go out on their boat. We went right down here. This is Storyful Drive. I'm sorry, Sleepy Hollow Lane to Storyful. And the road is underwater. We've got about 5 or 6 homes over there where the water is right up to the front door. But it's now going down, and that's a good thing. Now, keep in mind, during Harvey, the water was not.
Well, I can't speak to those 2 seasons specifically, but what's really interesting is I actually went to Google Scholar today to do some quick searches, and the phrase warning fatigue actually doesn't show up much in current research in social science. I think what it more relates to is past experience, and whether that's in the long past or more recent past, just the last few weeks or last month, past experience can play a very influential role in people's protective action decision making.
Gene, I want to ask you about, just everything that Americans are going through right now, from, numerous natural disasters to COVID to, potential unemployment, financial struggles. A lot of times we just feel burdened by it all, and something's got to give. How do we focus our energy so that we're focusing on the right things?
Well, you know what? I think we're all trying to focus on all the right things, aren't we? And it is, I have so much empathy for everyone who's going through so many different personal circumstances. Within the weather community, though, the right thing is to communicate those warnings. If life is at risk, we must maintain and continue that consistent communication of life-threatening risks. So I think we've just got to stay the course. We can feel exhausted. I certainly feel exhausted many days. We can feel exhausted, but I still believe that the literature would show people want to know what risks they're facing. And so we just have to persist and be resilient.
And Gina, with what's going on in Southeast Texas today with Beta, I got to get this topic in front of you and get your take on the continued problem we have keeping people from driving their cars into water-covered roads. I'm sure people are in some ways tired of hearing "turn around, don't drown," tired of hearing me say "don't drive your car into a water-covered road," tired of flash flood warnings. But we're also tired of seeing people continuing to drive their cars into the water. So do you think there's still hope to lessen, as much success as we've had with "turn around, don't drown"? Is there hope to lessen that behavior more, or do we need to put a lot of money into more barricades to keep people from getting into that water in the first place?
I think there's a lot of hope in a variety of ways. I think technology is certainly helping with different apps that not only give you directions, but they can tell you where the hazard is and to sort of inform you to turn around. Again, I know we've talked about this before, but we tend to stay in routines. And so that way from work to home, we know we have that particular route. So it's hard to change automatically. But I have hope that with learning about public perceptions of flood risks, as well as new technologies, I am certain we can find new and unique solutions in the future.
I think we can. Gina Esco, always so great to talk to you. Thanks so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Alex?
I want to give you a quick look at the fires burning across parts of Oregon. We are getting some needed rain for some of these areas. There's a look at the active fires. And again, through midweek with our low level or our upper level low swinging east, we actually get in on some much needed wet weather across Washington and Oregon. We're going to check in with Paul Goodlow there in the Houston area as Weather Underground continues.
You're watching America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel.
Welcome back to Weather Underground. I'm meteorologist Paul Goodell live in downtown Houston. You're looking northward to the toll lanes, HOV lanes, closed underwater, about 5 or 6 feet of water. And let's talk about this. The good news is we've had some of the water recede here, but this is the problem. Houston, fourth largest city in the country, and I got a bottle of water here. I poured it here on the grass. Okay, it's kind of slowly sinking in. Now I pour it here on the concrete. It does nothing but run right off. That's how we got in this problem here. You get like a foot of rain, a half foot of rain in a few hours, a day, day and a half. All that water runs off the concrete and fills in the low spots. Now, overall, Houston's relatively flat. We're about 50 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. The elevation here is about 50 feet, 45 feet or so. So basically, we drop a foot in elevation every mile. If you're a runner, this is a great place to run long distances because it's relatively flat. With that type of slope, you barely notice a hill going downhill or uphill, but that's the concern. Once you have this water here, it's slow to get on out of here. This is water coming in from Buffalo Bayou, and as high as it has gotten today, it is still 10 plus feet lower than it was with Harvey. Is the flooding significant? Yes, but it's not historic. That's some good news. But right now we're seeing some dry skies and it's tropical feeling. It's so humid here. I just took the jacket off real quick. But the concern, Alex, is, yeah, you've been showing us the radar. There is more rain to come here. So we're not quite done with the danger of more flooding here in Houston.
No, and yeah, you brought up that great point. Once you get into these urban areas where there's a lot more concrete, it is so much more difficult for that water to drain effectively, especially when you're dealing with rainfall rates like what we have seen. Looking at our future radar, where is this heavy rainfall going to set up? Well, we think moving forward through the evening and overnight, north and east side of Houston, as opposed to the south side, could be the areas that really get in on the drenching rainfall. Not to mention portions of Louisiana getting into southern Arkansas. We think we'll see some persistent heavy showers. So threat of flooding will be located in some of these areas too. Take a look at Wednesday afternoon. We've got some of that heaviest moisture making its way into Alexandria, areas around Lake Charles, and some of those heavy showers even work into parts of Mississippi by the time we get into Wednesday evening. So again, we remain under that threat of flash flooding tomorrow and into early Thursday. We're going to be watching portions of Louisiana, southeastern Arkansas, and a lot of the state of Mississippi for that opportunity for flash flooding. Rain and thunderstorms likely there tomorrow. As we move into the second half of the week, Thursday, we begin to see that rain advance into parts of middle and eastern Tennessee, Georgia, and then, Mike, by Friday, how about the Carolinas?
All right, thank you very much for that, Alex. Well, southeast Florida, it's actually the only part of the hurricane-prone states that hasn't seen any tropical alerts so far this year. From South Texas way over here, folks, all the way up to down East Maine, we have had watches and warnings. Notable exception, it's literally right here. That's it. The southwest coast of Florida, unscathed so far, including Tampa, Naples, Fort Myers, Sarasota. So, Dr. Nab, there's got to be a reason here that places like Maine have been affected, but not southwest Florida.
Well, part of it is a little bit of luck. I mean, We've had plenty of systems like Charlie hit the southwest coast of Florida in August. But part of it is the way the atmosphere works. October is often a bad time for Florida. Now, a lot of you have also been in the cone, more than others. New Orleans, Houston, you're at the top of the list. Now, in New Orleans, you haven't gotten hit every time. Same with the other cities listed here. So, sometimes the forecast can change, and being in the cone doesn't guarantee you're going to get impacts. Now, when we go from September to October, generally speaking, September's a busier month. But in October, it's not just about where the systems form, not how many systems form overall, it's about where they form. And in October, yes, you can get systems forming just about anywhere, but things really start to cluster close to home, with the problem being that the Northwest Caribbean is a hot spot and systems tend to want to come north with that preferred track into Florida. And there have been so many notorious hurricanes that have struck the west coast of Florida in October, going back to the big one, the 1921 major hurricane that made landfall just north of Tampa Bay. And we had the big storm surge flooding event there before a lot of people lived there, all the way up to Wilma. And so, Alex, it's really important to realize that in the last 15 years, we've had really busy Octobers for hurricanes. 2005, 2010, all those busy years. This year, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, and heading into October now, it's also fall. Today, the official start of the fall season. So even as we get into fall, still have to watch for hurricanes. But we asked what your favorite thing about fall is. Hurricanes not one of the choices. Right now, leading the pack, the cooler temps that many of us already got in a little taste of this weekend. Another hour of Weather Underground headed your way next. Right now on Weather Underground, a significant flood threat unfolding as Beta continues to fuel heavy rain. We've got slow-moving tropical depression Beta already having dumped more than a foot of rain across portions of Texas, including Houston. That left roadways flooded and motorists stranded. We've got live coverage as more rain continues to fall. We'll tell you who could be in store for dangerous flash flooding this evening and tonight.
And with so many storms and changes in severity from forecast to forecast, is warning fatigue starting to set in as a never-ending 2020 hurricane season just barrels on? We discuss how to avoid falling victim to the fatigue and the storms. That's next on Weather Underground. Well, tonight, Houston Metro goes underwater as Beta moves through. Hours of heavy rain have triggered flash flooding. We've got you covered tonight on Weather Underground. I'm Mike Bettis.
I'm Alex Wilson. We're with you until 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central as we track it all. Houston has been the big problem spot today with downpours leaving water rising across the city. We had streets blocked, highways impassable, motorists were stranded, and officials actually had warned people to stay off the roads. Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo issued a stern warning this afternoon, or really a rebuke to the people who tried to get out on the roads anyway.
Your sedan is not a submarine. Your minivan is not magical. So stay off the roads right now and make sure you do so until the threat passes.
Well, here's what we know at this hour. Right now, Beta a tropical depression, but it remains a major flood threat to not just Texas, but also Louisiana, too. In fact, more than 10 million people are under a flash flood watch, 2.6 million under a flash flood warning, and pumps that are already operating to keep floodwaters out of Grand Isle, Louisiana. 213 coastal floodgates were closed this morning in Louisiana. We give you a look at the landfall for Beta. Don't want to forget about that. That happened around 10 o'clock local time near Port O'Connor, Texas, 5 miles to the north of town with winds 45 miles per hour. But then the rain really began to amp up around the Houston metro area, particularly the south and west side of town. That's where we saw some of the biggest totals. Look at these numbers. Off to the west of town on 10, we saw over a half foot, even some double-digit totals, over a foot, though, as we head into the southern suburbs. So really big soaking rainfall. And Mike, unfortunately, now when we look here moving forward, we think it's going to be the north and east communities that could be getting in on a good drenching.
It might just end up shifting a little bit here. Alex, thank you. And for the latest on that flooding, we turn to meteorologist Paul Goodlow. He's joining us from Houston tonight. And Paul, I feel like it's always about keeping your eye on the ball, right? Because last night it was south side. Tonight it could be the north side. So different parts of town could get hit tonight.
Yeah, and places that hopefully haven't had that much rain will get more rain tonight, so you can kind of share the wealth, because if places like downtown and south of the city get hit again, big concern. You look over my shoulder, you can still see the fast rolling waters here. This is where Buffalo Bayou meets White Oak Bayou right here on the north side of downtown, so a lot of flooding, a lot of water out of its normal containment banks, but not at major flood stage yet. That's some good news. In fact, if you count a pan this way, you still see water from the bayous up blocking some of the roads. I'm going to bring in the Chief of Police here in Houston, Art Acevedo. Thanks for joining us, Chief. And we've had numerous rescues here, and talk about how the majority of them have not been people in homes. They've been people in cars driving into floodwaters.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully it's not people in homes, but we have people that don't get it. It only takes about an inch of moving water to actually sweep you away. And so we've had over 100 rescues since last time I checked of people between us and the fire department that just drove right into the water and aren't heeding the mayor's warnings and all the warnings to stay home.
And we've seen a lot of pickup trucks. There's a lot of oil and gas, a lot of agriculture in the area, so a lot of pickup trucks in the roads, and a lot of pickup trucks have also been trapped in the water.
Yeah, I think that people think just because they're in a pickup truck, too many folks think they can just drive through anything, and they find out the hard way that even our high water rescue vehicles that we have, the big old Army surplus vehicles, even those sometimes can get in trouble. So the best thing to do is stay home, and if you see water, just turn around. It's not a slogan, it's a way to stay alive.
Now, a lot of people compare any flood event to what happened 3 years ago with Harvey.
Yeah.
How would you compare and contrast those two events?
Hey, no, thank God this isn't a Harvey, at least not yet. But we're worried about what's coming in the next, 12 hours or so. So we're nowhere close to being what Harvey was. But as you can see, we're close to getting some major flooding if we keep getting any more rain.
Yeah, it's a big concern. You have some dark clouds coming this way. And this is a very unique year as well to deal with a flood event because we also have the ongoing pandemic. How has that changed what's going on, including your fellow officers?
Yeah,
as well?
I mean, when you think about the pandemic and you think about here we are wearing our masks, it makes it that much more challenging. But we're the Houston Police Department, we're first responders, and we do whatever it takes to keep our community safe, and that's what we plan on doing tonight.
So a lot of people want to get out here. We've seen tons of people walking around looking at the floodwaters. What's your best advice to the Houstonians here as you still have potentially more heavy rain come through tonight and tomorrow morning?
Yeah, you can't see what's going on.
Bottom line, turn around, don't drown, huh?
That's exactly right. Thank you.
Chief Acevedo, thank you so much for your time,
Thank you
and stay safe out there. You're the men and women here at the Houston Police Department. So the good news, guys, is we've actually noticed this water start to recede. There's a flood gauge way out there. You can see past that middle green light, and then just below that, you see that flood gauge there. That was up over 7 feet a couple hours ago. Now it's down, if my eyes can tell right, it's probably under 5 feet. So that's some good news. But still, there's 5 feet of flood water here, and I wouldn't go more than another maybe 10 feet because the water gets just pitch black. You have no idea what's there. You have no idea if there's a manhole cover that has been pushed up and over. We've seen manhole covers with floodwaters bubbling out of them. So, I laugh every time I see anyone, usually it's a reporter, not a meteorologist, a reporter walking through floodwaters with the chest waders on. That's a manhole cover opening just a YouTube moment away from perhaps just being all over the internet. But it's just not a safe thing to do. Stay out of the waters. It's meant for these guys. It's meant for the ducks, not for us. The good news is the water is receding. As long as we stop it from coming from the clouds here, we will start slowly improving the conditions here around Houston. But other areas got hit with even more rain than here in downtown Houston. That's some of the cities and towns south of town. Let's head there now. Our Mike Seidel is in Pearland, Texas. And Mike, they really got clobbered last night with heavy rain, which lasted into this morning.
Yeah, some spots over a foot of rain. You're right about the floodwaters. We were out on a boat earlier. Fire ants, and there's snakes out there too. Charles, to see him in person, he was out early this morning, got some great pictures on the 610 freeway. There's his drone right there. Charles, let's go down the road here. We're on Sleepy Hollow Drive in Pearland, which is the southeast side of Houston, and we'll go down the street and show you the homes that are being impacted. There's about 6 homes out there where they can't get to their driveways or front door unless they're in a boat, because the water has surrounded the front part of the houses and coming in the sides. Not as much water in the back. The creek right now is at 16.47 feet at the Friendswood gauge just downstream. That's about 4.47 exactly. Flood stage is 12 feet. So we're almost 5 feet above flood stage, but we're still about 8.5 feet below where it was for Harvey. So we're doing much better. You can see Clear Creek over in the distance over by the berm. And by the way, over in that berm area over there were homes back before Alicia and Allison, I should say, back about 20 years ago, and they never rebuilt over there. We're seeing more and more of that, where people are realizing, do we want to rebuild because of the flood potential or even now the fire potential in the west? And they're not, they're leaving and heading to either higher ground or a less fire-prone area, like in California, Oregon, and Washington. So no more homes over there. These homes were all hit very hard with Harvey. As you can imagine, with 9 more feet of water, it would go almost up to the roof here on these homes here in Pearland. Now the water has come down about, I'd say about 4 or 5 inches in the vertical and about 40 feet in the horizontal. So we're hoping that's a sign of things to come. But we're still under a flash flood watch, the whole Houston metro area, until tomorrow morning. The flash flood warning for this part of Houston has ended, but we still have to get the center of the circulation through the area. And Dr. Nab, you're looking at the latest short-range radar forecast, and we're hoping that we even up the score and we dump the rain, if we get more rain tonight, on the northwest and or the the northeast and more the eastern side of Houston, and let this area alone after what they went through last night.
Yes, but as the picture that you've been showing us tells the tale about, it's going to take a while for all that water to drain. So there's still a flood advisory for that whole southern part of Houston, even though the rain rates are not going to be all that high. We don't think south of Houston as compared to north of. I'll show you the forecast for that specific in just a little bit. East-northeast at 5 miles an hour. The center of the depression is still southwest of Houston. Until you get out of that onshore flow, it's going to be a continued rain-making system for Houston and for Beaumont, Port Arthur. It's not going to be till tomorrow evening at this time that it exits Texas and then loses its tropical characteristics, but still brings tropical moisture to the lower Mississippi Valley in the southeast. So here's where we have our flash flood warning and our flood advisory in the Houston area. The flash flood warning has been extended for downtown Houston in the immediate east, north, and northwest sides, especially up 290 to the northwest side. That's where the rain is still coming down the hardest, but it's still raining near downtown. So stay off the roads in this flash flood warning till at least 7 p.m. Central Time. And in some spots, we're getting 1 to 2.5 inches per hour. And this is in the past 6 hours. The rain has favored the downtown area, the immediate southwest side, and now increasingly up to the northwest. Now, where Mike Seidel is in Pearland and in a big area from League City over to Sugar Land, the whole south side of the metro is still under a flood advisory. So this would still be a stay off the roads kind of situation because it's still going to take a long time for all the rain that did fall to drain. And it is still raining, light to moderate rain in spots. So please stay off the roads. Don't get into any more trouble. And this is the rain that has already fallen in the past 24 hours. That volume of water is not going to drain quickly. Now, as far as more rainfall, one model depiction here does show that being favoring the northern part of the metro area where our flash flood warning is, but increasingly expanding over to the Beaumont, Port Arthur, Orange area. Oh, by the way, Alex, we still have some coastal flooding that's keeping the rainwater from draining back into the Gulf.
So we've got problems. We've got a little ways to go across eastern Texas before this moves on. And of course, there are other communities that are going to be looking at the risk of flash flooding. It's not just Texas, but also getting into portions of Louisiana and Arkansas. So let's look at the future radar for a place like Lake Charles, Louisiana. Or I guess first we'll start with the Houston area. We can start with anything. There we go. Houston metro area. We'll begin to see that heavier rain. And as Dr. Nab shows us, the east side could get in on some of those really heavy downpours. So unfortunately or fortunately, we are sharing the wealth. We're not looking at the areas that were hit so hard earlier today, but now we're going to add more communities into the list of those who have seen too much rain to handle. So that's why we're still concerned about flash flooding potential moving into tomorrow morning. By later tomorrow, say mid to late morning, I think we're going to be looking at that rain finally beginning to exit stage right, so to speak, and move into places like Beaumont, into the Lake Charles area. So rainfall still to come, could be over a half foot in some of these areas surrounding the Houston metro. Now we look at Lake Charles over to Lafayette, up towards Alexandria, Louisiana, and these are areas that are going to be picking up some of their heaviest rainfall overnight and into tomorrow. Take a look at 1 a.m. You can see Lafayette seeing some very heavy downpours. That could cause you some trouble out there on I-10. Luckily, it's overnight. I'm hoping a lot of people won't be out on the roads, but if you work very late or very early, however you look at it, I know I called it, I guess, very early when I did it, you could be up against some heavy downpours, too. That just makes it even tougher to see where you're trying to go. Rainfall still to come on the order of 3+ inches, Mike, across northeastern parts of Louisiana into the state of Mississippi and even across southern Arkansas, too.
Alex, I want a one-word answer from you.
Okay.
One word to describe today's weather in Atlanta.
Oh, that's it. That's my word.
But that was joy, right? That
was a happy.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a good
first day of fall, and you
spectacular.
First
magical,
day of fall, you knocked it out of the park, Atlanta. You really did, right? Things going to take a turn for the worse for us, unfortunately. You can thank Beta for a lot of it, too, because some, at least clouds start to roll in. You've already seen a little bit of that tonight. And then you start to see the rain roll in as early as tomorrow night. And then Thursday night, going into Friday, showers and thunderstorms back in your forecast. Temperatures start to creep back up as well. Close to 80 by Friday, which is close